So our final speaker of the day is Hans Rueffert, and Hans is a chef, author, speaker, advocate, and survivor. Hans is known by many titles, but his favorite title is perhaps teacher. He's a natural-born communicator, and he has the rare ability to inspire others. We have actually had a long relationship with Hans. We have a lot of his videos up on our site. He is a great chef, and we are so thrilled that we have finally been able to have him join us to speak here today. So, Hans.
I got into this this crazy cancer life at pretty much what I thought was the apex of my career. I had just been picked out of a pretty wide national selection to appear on the next Food Network star. I was America's choice, and I received over 1 million votes for people picking me to be on this show. So for 2 weeks I lived in Manhattan, and I got to be at the Food Network and do this crazy great competition and make a lot of new friends, and was consistently kind of winning those little competitions through there, and it was just a great experience all the way around. But I was having some difficulty during that time. It definitely does not breed confidence when people see a skinny chef. There's the old never trust a skinny chef thing going on. And for folks that don't know my story but may have seen me in the earlier part of my career when I was a much larger man, they'll see me, oh my God, you've lost so much weight, what's your secret? And I'm like, well, it's highly effective, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's called stomach cancer. So my story is a little different from the normal gastric cancer story, if there is such a thing as a normal gastric cancer story, in that I had none of the classic symptoms of reflux or difficulty swallowing or any of those digestion issues. I went into the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack. The left side of my body was going numb. I was having stabbing pains in my chest. Pretty much everything that you've ever been told are heart attack symptoms are what I was experiencing. I got to the hospital, and the next doctor in looked at my labs, and she had the insight or the wisdom to say, he has to be bleeding internally. Let's have a look. And sure enough, right at the GI junction, the junction between the stomach and the esophagus, sat a tumor that was bleeding. It's my lot in life, is feeding people, feeding things. Even feeding the fish makes me happy. Although I didn't make this meal for them. Those symptoms that I was experiencing were because my body was just shutting down. I was losing so much blood internally that my body was just kind of, going for a long, if not permanent, nap, and that was what really clued us in that I had cancer. So I really threw my weight, what was left of me, at teaching. That's where I kind of found this niche of going to places like a cancer wellness center in Atlanta. So we're gonna go raw okra, semi-raw corn, and I might end up, why not? Let's just do the whole damn thing. Protein's coming in two forms here. I've got black-eyed peas, and these are not canned. These are dried peas that I have rehydrated, and then quinoa. And quinoa is, I hope everybody in here knows what quinoa is, but if you don't, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. I have such a knowledge and love of food, and I have been told, and I like to think, that is a bit contagious. When you're dealing with disease, you hate to use the word contagious, but hopefully that's contagious in a good way, that people really start to think about their choices, and especially in the realm of food. That's one way that I can make people happy. When I add the rum to this to make the flame, I want to make sure that I'm away from the fire, and then I put the rum down before I come back. So anyway, so here we go. So I take it away from the fire, put in the rum, go around the pan, and then I take this out of the way, and that's the trick. So that looks good, huh? So, but again, you don't have to flame it. You can just put rum in the whole thing if you want to. But the flaming, it just kind of makes it fun and festive and a little celebratory. And I think sometimes we need to celebrate whatever it is. Come up with a reason to celebrate something. and look for an excuse to do things. You know, I was given a 2% chance of surviving this, and my thought from day one is, well, somebody had to be that 2%, and somebody had to make it, otherwise that percentage wouldn't be there. I think it's from the minute you have that cancer diagnosis, and we tend to think of it as an excuse. That's the red light in our life. I can't do this because of my illness. But I've tried to have cancer be the green light in my life. And obviously there are days where I don't feel well and I'm physically not able to do things. But on the days where I am physically able to do things, I kind of use that as my fuel. It's the thing in my tank. It's the thing that's kind of pushing me forward. Once you've been shown that sand in your hourglass, and once you kind of are aware of that, you know, the finite, ephemeral nature of life, and again, this sounds so cliche, but it's short. It's short, and it's precious, and it's the kind of thing that there will only ever be one today. It's a very limited resource, and what I do with today is sort of my decision. And whatever happens and happens to me, happiness is not a person, place, or a thing. It's a decision. So if the rest of my life, no matter how short or how long, is filled with moments like that, where I get to be with people that I love and admire and can feed them and make them happy, then that's a good enough goal for me.
Well, hello, friends, and thank you so much for hosting me virtually. Although I must admit, I was really looking forward to coming to Ontario and visiting friends in Canada again. So we'll have to make that be a reality post COVID, something to look forward to. But I'm sitting here smiling just thinking about how awesome this whole thing is. As a patient, you know, the speakers that have chimed in today, this it wasn't a resource, and I feel like I'm somewhat the old man in the room, and I'm proud to be the old man in the room as a 15 or coming on 16-year gastric cancer survivor, and you know, in some ways, I'm crazy proud that the mistakes that were made early on in my treatment, but not only but my class of patients in that time frame. The protocols have changed for the better, and the outcomes have changed for the better. And the resources, honestly, just again, the folks that are joining me on this panel. How lucky, how grateful patients should be to have these resources. So again, if I'm just looking like a crazy person sitting here smiling, I'm just proud that how our community has grown, and to have the resources like My Gut Feeling and the Gastric Cancer Foundation and Debbie's Dream and all of these wonderful organizations. No Stomach for Cancer. What a great community of folks, really just pushing the border and the boundaries and creating a better experience in this otherwise very bad experience. You know, so the irony, as I said in the video, of the chef with no stomach was not lost on me, and very quickly. After having my stomach removed, I had this weird dichotomy, because I'm constantly surrounded by food, and my professional life has been food, really, since I was 4 years old. In fact, I'm sitting right now above the restaurant that I grew up in, and so that food has permeated every aspect of. And so to have that sort of removed from me, or at least the full spectrum of that removed from me, was also an emotional thing to deal with. And I know for a lot of you, that's something that you struggle with, is not just the fact that you might have a limited sliver of the pie, pardon my pie analogy, but what used to be the full spectrum of foods that you could eat or tolerate now been reduced. And At some point you kind of learn to embrace that, but it is initially a shock that wait, I can't just eat what I want to eat and kind of gorge out from time to time without consequence. So um, I speak again as sort of the old guy in the room, that I was very stubborn at first about, I had a good team. I went to MD Anderson. I had a great surgical team, and I had some very loving, caring nurses and also nutritionists. But quite honestly, the nutritionists didn't understand my machine. And that was an analogy that kept being used when I finally found a partner in nutrition, also with MD Anderson, but wasn't the first person that they partnered me with. But she eventually sort of said, "Look, you used to be a diesel engine, and your diesel engine has been dramatically modified, and now you're more like an electric hybrid. And so if you keep putting diesel into this engine, which used to on that fuel, always going to have problems because that's not your engine anymore." And to me, that was a very clear analogy that I was feeding my machine incorrectly, which is why I was having problems with malabsorption and dumping syndrome, diarrhea, lots of those issues. And here I don't not even on a first name basis with many of you, and I'm talking about diarrhea. So I always feel a little. I'm sorry that you have to jump straight into the diarrhea talk. But I mean, it's a reality. Like the end result of even a great meal ends up in the toilet. So to me, to ignore that part of the equation, you're doing yourself a disservice. But my point being is that nutritionist, her name was Dr. Linda Pataki, was really good about holding me accountable to what I ate. And so really, again, the immediate advice or orders from her, my homework, was to keep a food diary of every single thing that went past my lips. I mean, even, it's funny, the things we don't really count as, number three is these islands that, the sugar glass of tea, this is stevia, by the way. But or the around Halloween, which we just passed, the little sample size candy bars that every office you go into has, and you don't think about those things, but something that small, which is high calorie, high sugar, can throw your glycemic index, which is, again, I'd never heard that term before. Even as a professional chef, I'd never heard a glycemic index. I'd cooked for diabetics. I knew that I couldn't put sugar in something, but I didn't really understand that some foods naturally were sugars. So this whole education, again, not as a professional, but as a patient, really learning about that connection, and this is a term I use a lot, but that connection between what we eat and how we feel. So in a normal digestion system, you have this sort of purgatory, which is the stomach, where whatever sort of food sins that you've committed, and I hate to villainize foods, but you know what I mean. Those nights where you kind of go out and you binge eat, or you binge drink, or you eat things that you just inherently know are not necessarily the best fuel for your current machine. But the stomach does a pretty good job of, and it's a very caustic environment, of breaking all of that down with stomach acid and trying to get it ready for digestion, which doesn't happen in the stomach. The stomach is a part of that, but the actual absorption, of course, happens farther down. And so, again, with that step missing, I had to become very mindful about what kind of fuel am I putting into my machine, keeping those notes of how does it make me feel, and then just noticing those correlations, which I think, it's very easy to kind of forget that with a quote unquote normal digestive system, that reaction is not too fast. So if you have a blood sugar crash, you might remember the last thing you ate and blame it, but the reality is it could be the thing that you had for breakfast that's just now finally getting through your system and being absorbed. So the missing that sort of purgatory, that connection became much quicker. And so as almost redundant or I don't know, obvious as it sounds, I started noticing that correlation, that if I ate greasy, fatty, overprocessed, overcooked, heavy foods, I felt greasy and fatty and overcooked and overprocessed and heavy. I mean, like, just my whole being, I just felt like I was wearing this coat of just ugh, because I was making bad food choices. Because the alternate of that, or the flip of that, was when I ate these fresh, vibrant, healthy, alive foods, I felt and feel fresh and vibrant and healthy and alive. And I practice what I preach. And I think in the course of a day, I do more than most. Again, I think I had air quotes are contagious. I picked up air quotes somewhere. But as far as normal people, I do a lot more than a lot of normal people, and I think it's because of the way that I fuel my machine, my engine, I'm not neurotic about it. I mean, of course, there are times if I'm traveling and if I'm at someone's home, I'm not going to just say, no, I'm not going to eat this, but I will be very mindful about how much of that I eat, or I'll be polite and say, I'm not doing great with sugars, but let me try that. I'll have a bite of something. Or try to have a ratio. And I sort of, again, this is different for every patient, but for me, I've found that if in the course of a meal or as I'm eating, if the protein count is usually, again, this is just anecdotal, but let's say twice as much as the carbohydrates, usually that's sort of a safer thing for me. But not having a stomach and not having the stomach acid, I don't do well with meat protein. So just because on the package, say for if it's grams of protein, if you have the luxury of stomach acid, you might be able to get most of that. It becomes bioavailable. But without stomach acid, it's sometimes harder to unlock that protein in a complex, sort of bound up in an animal protein setting. So I have found, and a lot of my videos, and you can see them on YouTube. The series is called the Gesundheit Kitchen, or you can go to the Gastric Cancer Foundation's website, gastriccancer.org, and there's a nutrition series there. And I tend to focus on plant-based protein. So, and even then, try to go for the complete proteins. So I use a lot of quinoa or chia seeds or hemp hearts or spelt or millet or amaranth or teff. So all of these grains, and this sort of trendy term for them right now is ancient grains, although I imagine they're just about as old as any of the other ones. But those are the things that our ancestors, great cultures like the Mayans, they usually their mainstay through normal life was things again like amaranth or millet or barley or these whole grains. And you've heard all of the great health benefits about things like whole grains, but again, just as a fuel, it is an amazing food source. So, but again, I can talk about this stuff forever, and I know we're pressed on a little bit of time because there's really so much to talk about. And each of the guests today, we could do our own entire day lecture and talk about these things. And you really do sometimes have to just shut me up because I will talk about this stuff forever. So I'll save some of this for questions from folks. But to me, the inspiring thing, well, a couple of points I kind of want to wrap with. And one is that when you're going through treatment and you feel like, that you have no control in any of this, right? Whether it's a genetic thing or environmental thing, and you think that, you are the victim of a circumstance that happened to you. And even when you have a plan of action, chemo and radiation and all of the testing, like that's all someone else is doing it to you. So it seems like there is so very little that we can control. But I think, to me, one of the inspiring things is that is the thing that we can control can benefit from treatment. Even during the unpleasantness of chemo and radiation, we can control our nutrition. And obviously there are times it's harder than others, but that's life, right? There are always going to be times where whatever the situation is, you're going to have harder days than others. So to me, it's inspiring that you have some part to play in this. I mean, to me, the other part of that is your positive mental outlook. And from the very beginning, I have tried to smile my way through this. It's the fake it till you make it kind of thing. Even on days where I don't feel like smiling, I find that if I find a way to, smile through it, to make a joke about it, not in a flippant way, not in a dismissive way, but to find some little twist to that where you can say, well, there's some tiny little sliver of something nice that you can comment on. But the other thing I want to say is as a hobby. So, okay, we're getting through the health side of this, and we're figuring out the nutrition. And some have said to me, well, doesn't that sort of demystify food for you, or take away some of the romance? And I think it's the opposite. To me, it really highlights the magic of food. And I'm a 48-year-old guy. I have been working in a restaurant since I was old enough to wash dishes, so over 40 years. And I'm still learning every single day. So as a career, or as a hobby, or as a vehicle towards motivation, um, even on the days where you don't feel like it, just realize that this is something. If you can kind of get yourself into the kitchen, put on some music that you like, listen to a podcast, and enjoy the process of peeling the carrot or dicing the onion. To me, that becomes cathartic. The process of making food, learning about food, sharing pictures of food, is cathartic to yourself, but it's also to others. And so that to me is an exciting part of that. So again, I can talk about this stuff all day long, and I encourage you to check out the video series. I'm happy to do it. I hope I'm hoping in the future we can do a live cooking demonstration. That was sort of the plan originally, was to come up to across the border and do some of that, because I think there's also something about being in the room with food and seeing that the stuff that I make is ideally delicious, number one, because if it's not good, you're not going to do it. But number two, it's also easy, because I can make a lot of complicated food, but if it's complicated, it's not something that you're going to do. So I do like to focus on these, pun intended, digestible recipes, so that they're easy to replicate, and easy to understand, and easy to follow. But I want to thank number one, my gut feeling, for putting this together, but number two, for everybody that's taken time out of the day to have this fellowship. This most important part of today is the fact that there is a community where we can be positive and be forward thinking, and talk about tomorrow as much as about today. So thank you, guys. Let's have a panel.
Thank you so much, Hans. Every time you cook, every time I watch one of your videos, I go and grab a snack. Unfortunately, I'm not like you. This is what I'm snacking on right now. But we definitely want to have you in Toronto for a live demo. The one thing I do appreciate about Gesundheit Kitchen and the videos that you put out on YouTube is they're easy for people to make. So I'm somebody that has no cooking skills whatsoever, but I feel that I can follow along. So your videos are just so valuable to everyone out there.